among other people years ago, attracted the attention of none other than John Wayne, whom I met in one of the Posidonia with the late George Libanus. He is the author of several articles, attended many conferences, and actually this is his third lecture and presentation in New York. Having been here twice before in Alexander Onassis' presentation, and in Greece's, at that time he spoke about the Greeks and the sea. He's an authority on shipping history, some of his books, and I think we are particularly lucky to have him here today and to speak on the subject of shipping and the way shipping developed the last 100 years. And of course, those who are not from here would forgive us if we become a little more parochial. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Matthews Dilos.
Thank you. There is some words in Greek before I start, please. Ευχαριστώ πάρα πολύ για την τιμή που μου κάνατε να είμαι σε αυτό στο βήμα αυτού του συμποσίου, του Κοραή, και μαζί με σένα ευχαριστώ όλο τον Κοραή για αυτή την τιμή. Όταν με πήρες πριν από πάνω από 6 μήνες, δέχτηκα αμέσως, διότι γνωρίζω ότι υπάρχουν στιγμές στη ζωή μας που ο λόγος, γραπτός και προφορικός, επισκιάζεται από τα συναισθήματα. Και αυτά τα συναισθήματα βιώνω σήμερα, εγώ κοντά σας, έχοντας κοντά μου την οικογένειά μου, έχοντας κοντά μου συγγενείς, αγαπημένους και φίλους από τη Νέα Υόρκη και έχοντας κοντά μου όλους εσάς, τους χιώτες της Διασποράς και τους φίλους των χίων της Διασποράς, που ομολογουμένως είναι τα πιο ζωντανά κύτταρα του ελληνισμού. Σας ευχαριστώ όλους για αυτή την πρόσκληση λοιπόν και εύχομαι χρόνια πολλά στο Κοραή. It's a warm yet breezy summer day. A young man in his 30s starts off from his native island of Chios, still under Ottoman rule, to the New World. Unlike hundreds of other fellow islanders on board the same ship, he is no immigrant. The goal of his lonely adventure is to raise the necessary capital that will allow him and his brothers to purchase their first merchant steamship. Meanwhile, until that day comes, together they run a second-generation family partnership, setting sail in the Mediterranean and Black Sea ports on board their old brig. A steamship will broaden their activity beyond those limited areas and hopefully enhance their profits. After a brief stay in New York, working on board the Manhattan to Staten Island ferries, a young fellow takes his chances, accepting a risky yet highly rewarding job as a laborer in the building of the Panama Canal. To him, heat, hard work, and above all, the risk of contracting malaria are no obstacles. He works in the canal for 2 years, and after narrowly escaping death from the disease, he heads back to Vrondados, his hometown, to fulfill his dream, generously rewarded by the opportunities offered him in the New World. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a story that took place between 1905 and 1907. The purpose of mentioning it in the context of my presentation is to give you an example of how, in times when Chios was still enslaved, its inhabitants were allowed to dream of a future and could even leave the island if they so pleased. Chian commerce and shipping were already free, industrious, and cosmopolitan. In fact, during the 19th century, Chian merchants were already established not only in the Near East centers of Constantinople and Smyrna, but also in other major centers of Europe, such as London, Marseille, Vienna, and Odessa. After the massacre of Chios in 1822, the waves of Chians who fled the island created new centers for their activities in free Hellas. Initially as founders of Hermopolis in Syros, and later on as settlers of prime properties in the heart of Piraeus, then an unimportant port. These were offered to them by the Greek government for development. Both towns soon became the most dynamic gateways for shipping and trade in the Eastern Mediterranean, thanks to Chian entrepreneurship. So, when Chios was finally liberated in 1912, its shipping and trade were in a state of business as usual. Chian merchants and ship owners were already foreign market oriented and thus had not been adversely affected by Ottoman rule. As for Chians of the lower classes, there was always ample opportunity for them to be employed on board the ships of their compatriots, whether they resided in Chios or in free Hellas. Towards the last decade of the 19th century, the merchant fleet under Chian control already included 4 steamships and about 300 sailing ships. These were the critical years of transition from sail to steam, when the Chians were among the first Greeks to adopt the enormous technological advantages and commercial benefits of the Industrial Revolution in shipping. At their service, for the important capital and the increased risks involved, were financial institutions and insurance companies established decades before by fellow merchants, also from Chios, who had accumulated significant wealth since the Napoleonic Wars. Also available in Chios was a traditionally solid educational infrastructure for navigators that was later enriched with engineering schools, first in Syros and later in Piraeus, the first of their kind in Hellas. Their founders, Chian settlers, of course. Finally, to support the repairs and maintenance of steamships, the first refitting unit was already in place in Syros since 1861 and was gradually to become the primary shipyard in the Eastern Mediterranean. The Chians, like all other Greek shipowners, initially treated ships powered by steam with considerable mistrust. It was not before 1889, and while steamships were already carrying more than half the world's sea trade, that pioneer shipowners ventured to buy steamships. They initially came from Vrondados and Chora of Chios, then from Kardamila in 1898, and later on from Inousse in 1905. Only those of Langada refused to abandon the tradition of the wooden sailing ships, and by the time they did, in 1913, it was too late to renew their fleets. Victims of their passion for masted ships, they followed the fate of their colleagues from Galaxidi and disappeared from shipping. By the time Chios was freed, Chian shipowners had already turned massively towards the acquisition of steamers. 30 steamships were under their control in 1912, which became 50 by the time World War I erupted. Old and second-hand, they were bought exclusively in the London market, already the world center for sale and purchase of ships. They were small to medium-sized freighters, ranging from 500 to 4,000 gross tons, which took over the trades of their sailing predecessors, carrying grain, coal, timber, and other commodities in the familiar trade routes of the Mediterranean, the Black Sea, and the continent. It was not too long before the Chians expanded their trades beyond these traditional geographical limits to the Americas and the Far East, buying bigger and newer steamships. To understand the importance of London as a world shipping cluster, I point out that the bigger ship owners opened their own offices in the UK, 15 in all by the 30s, to represent themselves and other smaller ship owners who remained in Chios and Piraeus. Like in the old sailing days, the family structure of the business was omnipresent. It was the norm that ship owners and male members of their families sailed and served on board their own ships. Additionally, special ties were developed among the owners and their crews, who more often than not came from the same hometown. This usually led to a successful working relationship among all those on board. It is the nature of this relationship that explains how seamanship has always acted as a springboard to ownership, not only in Chios, but in all traditional seafaring areas in Greece. During the Balkan Wars, the merchant fleet of the Chians participated in the war effort as supply and troop ships for the Hellenic armed forces. Later on, the merchant fleet was commandeered by the government when Greece joined the Entente forces in 1916. The end of the war found Chios having paid its toll in ships and human lives like all other coastal regions of Greece. Out of a Greek merchant fleet of 474 steamships in 1914, 147 were lost, reducing by half its pre-war cargo carrying capacity. Statistics do not clearly show how many Chians were among the 148 Greek seamen who perished during the war. Let us also mention another 114 steamships totaling a capacity of 250,000 gross tons sold to foreign interests during the same period. Adding insult to injury, in those difficult times, the Greek government passed in 1917 a special law for shipping, exempting wartime profits from huge taxes, but only for those ship owners who decided to replace immediately their wartime losses with new ships. Many rushed to buy ships in a booming market, only to see their assets losing 9/10 of their value when the short-lived post-war reconstruction activity was over. This led to the loss of control of even more ships, as many Chian shipping companies went bankrupt. All in all, the beginning of the 20s found the fleet of Chios decimated, and its owners and crews in full disarray. 1922. A young man from Chios is now a mature ship owner in his 50s. His family business survived the war, but he now hears of a new national disaster taking place, one which is very near to his home and to his heart. He decides, along with other Chians, to rush their steamships into Krini, Chesme, and the Gulf of Smyrna to collect the fleeing Greek population trying to save themselves from massacre. The ships were among those waiting for orders off the island of Chios and Dinouse during those times of a grim shipping market. This was indeed a spell of good luck for the unfortunate fugitives from the other side of the Chios Straits. It is common knowledge in shipping cycles that market depression leads to fleet renewal, and Chian entrepreneurship could not be the exception to this rule. Between the two wars, the free shipping world was under continuous pressure, instigated by government protectionism over free shipping markets. During this period, the Chians, like other Greek shipowners, acquired 189 medium-sized, mostly overage freighters at very low prices. Some even ventured into new buildings for the first time ever. The cargo capacity now ranged between 2,500 and 10,000 gross tons per ship. A true revival, which even after sales resulted in a fleet of 109 Chian steamers just before the eruption of the Second World War. World War II. With more than 600 steamships totaling 1.8 million gross tons, the Greeks marshaled an important part of the fourth arm in the Allied forces. Once again, the toll in lives and ships was high for Greece, including Chios. More than 2,000 seamen and 450 steamers were lost through enemy action. Among those ships, 91 were under Chian ownership. Among the crews lost, 327 were from Chios, namely 117 from Kardamila, 106 from Rhodados, 53 from Minousse, 23 from Kora of Chios, 19 from Langada, and 9 from other parts of the island. The dark shadow of occupation is once again over Chios. Our young friend has reached his 70s and is stranded in his hometown. He was left without ships since the early days of the war. His only ship, a 32-year-old steamer, was torpedoed in the North Atlantic loaded with grain. The ship was too old and too slow, unable to make the 8 knots essential to follow the convoy. She was left behind alone, having no chance to survive from the lurking German U-boats. Thankfully, no member of the crew was lost. The next significant historical turning point for Chian shipping starts right here in New York, again beyond familiar island ground. Immediately after the war, Greek shipowners struck an agreement with the US government to buy 100 cargo ships of a 7,500 gross ton standard design. These were known as Liberties and were mass-produced during the war. They became the workhorses of US supplies to the Allies. From those ships, 41 were taken over by shipowners from Chios, plus another 3 out of 7 tankers also included in the same deal. These are the blessed Liberties, which together with another 800 of their type purchased later on in the free market, laid the foundation of the post-war miracle of Greek shipping. Hotel Pierre, 10th January 1947. Our friend has returned to the city of his early adventures, this time as a respected shipowner. Dressed in his finest attire and accompanied by his sons, he is attending a banquet hosted by the New York Committee of Greek Shipowners in honor of the Greek Minister of Mercantile Marine, Nicholas Abram. The latter had guaranteed the deal of the Liberties on behalf of the Greek government. Our friend, with his sons, is now one of the proud owners of the 100 blessed ones. New York was but the starting point of Greek post-war shipowning and seamanship. Evolving in an already established international shipping cluster, second only to London since the pre-war days, the Chian element flourished and excelled in all fields serving the industry after the war. from branch offices of Chian ship owners to chartering and sale and purchase brokerage firms, legal, financial and insurance services, ship supplies, repairs, and so on. Thus, New York Chians, together with the diaspora of other traditional shipping grounds of Greece, created their own shipping miracle, which remains luminescent to this day. The era of economies of scale achieved through the ever-increased size of ships had begun since the 50s. During the 60s, it was in full swing, and the Chians could not but be part of it. The name of the game now was new buildings, and Japan had already superseded the US and the UK as the world's major shipbuilder. South Korea would emerge later as a leader in the shipbuilding scene, followed by China in today's market. Renewing their fleets was a major concern for the Chians, and manning was equally important. Fortunately, crews were still abundant. Thriving private and public merchant marine academies pumped scores of new officers into the bloodstream of shipping, some of whom later became shipowners. During this period, and until the wave of emigration from Greece ebbed in the 70s, we also witnessed a parallel flow of manpower from Chios and other seafaring islands, mainly towards the United States and secondly, Australia. These were the so-called deserters, those who jumped ship. Thousands of them through the decades who would sign employment contracts as ratings on board Greek ships and then jump ship as illegal immigrants once they arrived at the first US or Australian port. Unless these people were apprehended by the immigration authorities, they would eventually make their way into the new worlds. The purpose of my mentioning this important trend is purely historical. However, since history is still alive here, it is a good opportunity to tell those of you deserters who may be present in this audience, I am glad you made it. Our man from Chios passes away peacefully at the age of 92. Before his death, he is told by his younger peers of a new ship design coming out of the Far East, the bulk carrier. He is in high spirits as he sees the third generation taking on yet another novel challenge. From the 70s until the present day, Chian shipping has continued its upward path, steadily controlling more than 40% of Greek shipping and sailing from peak to trough to peak in the shipping market circles, finally to achieve prominence in today's Greek merchant fleet. A fleet that has been gradually assuming greater importance in the Greek economy. This should mainly be credited to the nostalgia of Greek shipowners, and secondly to the rare displays of sound shipping policy by Greek governments. Important laws passed in 1953 and 1967 created a stable legislative framework that not only helped the growth of the Greek flag fleet, but also transformed Piraeus into a major shipping center. However, as in the old days, Greek shipping policy has often been encumbered by mistrust. Private maritime education was slowly strangled until it was finally abolished during the 80s. Public education, on the other hand, is in a constant state of disarray and decline. And while today shipping is the only industry standing firm in Greece's troubled times, its merchant marine ministry was abolished 3 years ago, only to be reinstated by the present government. A policy blend of ill-feeling, compounded by gross negligence and indifference to the self-evident facts and figures of all that shipping is for Greece. Greek-owned shipping stands today in first position worldwide, with more than 3,300 ships, 777 of them under the Greek flag, representing in total almost 15% of the world fleet cargo carrying capacity. The average age of the fleet is 10.5 years, almost 2.5 years younger than the world fleet's age profile. 40,000 Greek seamen are serving on board Greek-owned ships, as well as 150,000 Greek employees in 718 ship management offices and another 2,000 businesses supplementing shipping in Greece. Add to that 160 billion plus euro of foreign currency which have been imported to Greece since the turn of the millennium. Chian shipowners have their fair share in all these figures. Not to mention non-shipping investments of theirs in Greece funded by shipping income. Most important of all, the ever-increasing string of donations and charity to their native island and to their country, some known, others unknown to the public. Last but not least, it is worth mentioning the traditional participation of Chians, both in national and international shipping bodies, driven by their innate desire to promote common interests with fellow shipowners. The man from Chios is, of course, not among us today. He hasn't been for some time now, his family business now being in its 5th generation. Nevertheless, the spirit and the wisdom of our young friend and his generation remain omnipresent, distilling the basic and enduring principles of Chian shippowning: to be wary and respectful of the market, to be mindful of the upward circles and patient when the going gets tough, to be as close as possible to the ship and her crew, to be open and constantly alert to technical innovation, to communicate and to cooperate with fellow shipowners. All these virtues have made Chian shipowners successful and avant-garde. Throughout the century, our island has enjoyed her freedom. We are so lucky to be celebrating soon. I have no doubt that it is the life and times of those people, our ancestors, that manifests how Chios is to preserve its long seafaring tradition and rule the waves for generations to come. Thank you.
There you go, ladies and gentlemen. You know who that young man was? His grandfather. For those of us who have been around a few years, there are a whole bunch of Costas lost. One of them, as a matter of fact, married my son and baptized my grandson by my name. So that's the fellow he was talking about, Costas and Los. The next speaker comes from one of the most famous families from the island of Chios, the Negroponte families. His brothers are known all over the country and all over the world. One of them is called the prophet of digital revolution, Nicholas Negroponte. Another one, John Negroponte, who is known. In fact, he was honored here years ago with the Omirian Award and went all the way up to become the #2 person at the State Department. George chose a different path, the path of the arts. He studied at Yale University, and for a number of years he has been an artist that has been showing his works in different galleries, both in this country and in Greece. The Brook Alexander Gallery, the Kouros Gallery in New York, the Skoufa Gallery in Athens, and several others. Some of his works have been shown worldwide, including the Museum of Modern Art and the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. Has been reviewed in every major art periodical, New Yorker, the New York Times, and several others. He has taught for 2 decades the painting and drawing skills in a number of schools, such as the School of Visual Arts, Princeton University, Parsons School of Design, and several others. He is one of the founders of the Drawing Center and its first president. We are going into a different area right now. There will be some PowerPoints there. And we are very fortunate that George, who now lives in East Hampton with his wife and 3 children, was able to make it today and to tell us about one of America's most unknown, to me at least unknown, but most famous Greek-American painters. Ladies and gentlemen, George Negroponte.
Could we try the first image? First and foremost, my gratitude to Chris for asking me to be part of today's Centennial Symposium, for the opportunity to share my thoughts with you. Also, my thanks to Tulo Livanos, who introduced me to Chris, and to the Centennial Committee, and nudged me to participate. Today, I'm going to discuss an artist I have admired for a very long time. A man who shaped and defined art and culture during one of the most startling and explosive moments in history. An artist whose work continues to give us redemptive hope and solace at a time when art world follies trivialize almost everything humane and beautiful. William Basiotis. Greeks hold their artists in high esteem. Our culture is extraordinarily visual. It is respectful of the past and very knowledgeable. Greece's artistic output is legendary, and the story of Greek art in the 20th century continues in this tradition. The list is very long and always expanding. Stamos, Samaras, Antonakos, Daphnes, Chaldees, Chios, Bengulis, Trakas, Takis, Hadzipateras, Chrysa, Janakos, Hadzi, Kikas, Lekakis, Karamea, Milonas, Vulkos, just to name a few. The collective vision of these artists is constructed from a deeply felt response to craft, a compelling degree of individualism, and a tough-minded response to the outside world. For many of these artists, there's an echo of a lost time. Their cultural references are like ghosts gracefully saluting the Mediterranean. Basiotis possessed all these attributes and then more. He was the inventor and a gentle soul. His symbolic paintings powerfully animating dreamy and modulated spaces as we, the audience, willingly get swept up, free associating all along the way. So today we move back in time to a period in the 1940s when Basiotis and Jackson Pollock shared the spotlight in one of America's greatest moments. They essentially redefined the very meaning of painting in a dazzling moment of richness and invention. While he was alive, Basiotis was well known, sought after, admired, and respected. Since his death in 1963, Basiotis has gradually slipped from view, without explanation and without justification. I have not heard of any exhibitions commemorating this event, his centennial. I have just learned of one symposium honoring Basiotis in his centennial at the National Academy of Art in Manhattan later this year. The next slide, please. William Basiotis made quiet, idiosyncratic, glowing paintings and drawings of intense formal vitality and deep historical ambition. His tonal color was exquisitely pitched and turned material substance into enchantment. The paintings are scumbled, preconscious, and blurred by fantasy, like living dreams. Very often, the natural world is mentioned as the principal subject of his work, albeit an elusive and fictionalized one of shapes, colors, and line. The best work of Basiotis is delicate, almost hesitant, and evokes an otherworldliness captured, set apart, and isolated. Basiotis was without question one of the most gifted artists of the New York School. He was 32 years old when his first exhibit opened at the Peggy Guggenheim Art of the Century in October of 1944. His close friend, Robert Motherwell, helped him install the show. Jimmy Ernst designed